If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. This happened a few years ago when I was 19. I'm now in my mid-20s. I still remember this very clearly because how scared I was. Back when I was living 600 plus miles away from my parents in a different state, even though there was distance, my mum and I still spoke on the phone at least twice a week, and we're still really close. So when we found out about her cancer, I didn't think twice about doubling down on everything to see her. A plane ticket would be expensive, and I had a 10-year-old Toyota that had been a bit beaten up, but it'd get me there quite cheaply. My parents weren't thrilled by the idea of me driving 11 hours by myself, but my mind was made up. So they offered me a deal. I would stop at a rest stop every 2 to 3 hours and stretch my legs and call them. And in exchange for this courtesy, they would pay for my gas. If I didn't call within 3 hours, they'd assume I was in an accident and call me repeatedly, interrupting my podcast along the way. And that's why at this particular rest stop at 2:45 AM, this was actually one of the nicest stops, well lit, multiple vending machines that didn't have huge cages around them, and the payphone wasn't broken and looking clean. There's a couple cars there with people sleeping in them. I still had 15 minutes before I had to check in with my parents. I got out my car, stretched my legs, and almost jumped out my skin when I hear a man's voice behind me. "Miss, can I ask you a favor?" I turn around and he's leaning against my car. I have no idea how he got there so fast. I didn't see him when I parked, but there he is, uncomfortably close to me. He looked to be in his 40s. He didn't look dirty or twitchy. He was too close, but his body language didn't scream threatening. And even though I was 19 years old, barely over 5 feet tall, and 110 soaking wet, I still decide to ask what he needs. He told me that he accidentally locked his keys in his truck, and could he just borrow my phone real quick to call a friend. It would just take a second and it would really help him out. And I almost handed him my phone. I was reaching in my pocket to hand him it with the no problem look. Then I looked at his face. Like I said, the rest stop's surprisingly well lit, and this guy looked somewhat normal, except for his eyes. He had dead shark eyes. You know what I mean? Like Ted Bundy? Them kind. And he's smiling. But his eyes are so vacant and dark. I got the feeling, the runaway feeling immediately. I put on my best customer service smile and told him, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, I don't have a charger and I need the battery. I'm sorry, I can't help you." And I turned and walked about 20 feet away, but he doesn't leave. He's just watching, staring at me. And now I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to leave him alone with my car because he creeps me out and has a serial killer face. So going to the bathroom's out. I also wanted to get away from him, prove I'm not gonna help, and maybe he'll leave. I could technically get into the car, but I would have to get really close to him unless I crawled over my passenger side seat and he won't move. So I did the first thing that pops into my head, calling my dad. And my dad, for the first time that night, doesn't pick up. Great. Now he's staring at me. So I faked a conversation, angled my body so the guy couldn't see that I'd hung up, and loudly said I should be home in half an hour. I mentioned exactly where I am, reassured the fake caller that this rest stop's good, with lots of people and cameras. The guy still ain't moved, and I'm running out of steam on this fake conversation. In the years since, I've actually thought a lot about the things I could have said while pretending to talk to my dad, but in the moment, I was so freaked out that my mind went blank, so I hung up and didn't know what to do, hoping the fake phone call would be enough to scare him off, but he was still leaning up against my car. I stalled for another few minutes. I bought cookies from the vending machine. I walk around a little and I'm panicking inside. At this point, he's leaning up against my car staring at me for at least 10 minutes. I honestly debate walking up to one of the men sleeping in the parked cars asking for help. And just then, I have the thought of waking up someone to try and give me help. But I decide unless he touched me, I'm just going to pretend he ain't there. He waited until I was unlocking my car door before he started talking to me again. He told me again that he really needs my phone. He's stranded there, unless he can call his friend to bring spare keys. He's not angry or begging. His voice sounds weirdly frantic but friendly. He's creepily watching me still. It's been way too long. I almost point out the working payphone, just in case I'm wrong about this and I was being unnecessarily worried, but he leaned his head forward as I'm getting in, and I lost all nerve and slammed the locked door as quick as possible. He didn't move until I started the car and pulled it in reverse. Then he finally steps back and pulled it up. I don't have my seatbelt on. I was so focused on getting away from him. Then about halfway out the rest stop, my mum calls me. I don't want to worry my mum, so I say everything's fine. Now that I was in my locked car away from him, I started to feel more safe. My mum lectures me about road safety. I then watch a guy cross to a truck, unlock the door and get in. The keys being locked in no longer seemed like an issue for him. I watched the truck head back out on the freeway and out of sight. I had to pretend to be fine not to upset my mum. I didn't get back onto the road for another 20 minutes. And when I did, I didn't speed. I didn't want to see the truck. I found out years later that the closest city to that rest stop had a major problem with sex trafficking, and that girls who look like they don't live nearby are easy targets, and the way he approached me is very similar to what they do. I still have no idea what he was planning, and I hate thinking of what happened on that day. I came down a hill with a full load of grain, which had a gross weight of about 86,000 pounds, and rounded a curve somewhere close to 60 miles per hour. Dead ahead, about 100 yards away, was a narrow bridge, and sitting in my lane, in the middle of the bridge, were several people in lawn chairs with coolers, scattered around, with fishing lines tossed to the side. I laid on the air horn. I hit the brakes as quick as I could. The people in the lawn chairs had already crapped themselves. They jump over to the sides and I narrowly avoid them. I then say, "Have you read the no fishing off the bridge signs?" To which one of them said, "We saw it, but we didn't think cars or trucks would come from your way, so we thought we're safe." I'm a long-haul truck driver, and I've seen plenty of supernatural stuff out on the interstate. Now, within the first few months of driving, IIRC was PA. My first couple years I was a night driver, so it was hard to see things sometimes. But the one in PA was me trying to follow a flatbedder who was hauling serious loads through the mountain. At one point, I started falling back because I can feel the van starting to lean. It wasn't long after I reached down to take a swig off my handy monster I had, and I look up, and there's a guy standing off the shoulder just outside the tree line wearing what appears to be some type of military uniform. It looked as though he's Revolutionary War era. He had a musket as well. As I approach, I can see him staring right at me. And then he starts walking back into the tree line, still looking at me. Before he manages to make it through the trees, he disappears, like literally vanishes into thin air. I had my windows down, and the air in the area gets real cold. After about a mile, it warmed up again, and I had a really sad feeling coming over me thereafter. Needless to say, I didn't stop for the rest of my trip. While driving in New Mexico, I've seen some things in the sky that I can't explain. Lights rapidly changing direction, taking off at blinding speeds, with no sound barriers being broken. I've seen lights hovering over the desert several miles off the interstate. Then it suddenly takes off, and the light cuts out. Various shapes and sizes from what I can make out. I know military aircraft pretty well, and some of them better than others. And I know that there's no military aircraft that can do that. Conventional aircraft can't possibly either. The most vivid one would be at an off-ramp in New Mexico. I stopped to use the bathroom and decided to turn into a 15-minute break. As I'm stargazing, admiring how clear the stars are, I saw what looked like a formation of lights in the shape of a triangle lifting up off the desert floor, then taking off into the sky. It kept on gaining altitude until it disappeared. I looked down at my watch and noticed it's not ticking, so I pull out my phone and it's off. I turn my phone on, and according to my phone, it's been 5 minutes since my watch stopped. It felt like something out of a film. Kent, Texas is another one. There's an old Chevron station, I think. Seems like FedEx drivers like stopping there in droves. I'm guessing it's a popular drop and hookup point for them or something. But one day I needed the bathroom, so I had to stop. I don't know why I didn't stop in the van horn, so I pull off and roll up to an empty parking lot across the street. Kent is an abandoned town. I walk up to the bush line and notice a makeshift fire pit. The wood is somewhat burnt, but not all the way. The weird thing is that there's an unscratched dollar bill stuck in the wood. For a second I was like, ooh, I think that's candy. But then this feeling suddenly come over me, so I left it alone, peed in the bush, and as I'm walking back, I look over and get a real negative feeling. I look to the ground in front of me, and bam, there's a rattlesnake literally 2 feet from me. I stop dead in my tracks. It starts hissing at me and goes to lunge, but luckily hits a twig. I run as fast as I can back to my truck, feeling like someone's behind me. I kick up a lot of dust getting out of there, and have never stopped in Kent since. In Missouri, I stopped off at a ramp to stretch out and take a breather. As I'm smoking a cigarette, a little girl from some direction I couldn't figure out where giggles and says hi. "Hi, mister." My initial reaction was, what's a kid doing out here at this time? So I walk back and say hi. She responds with, "My mum says you'll be okay, don't worry." Now utterly confused, I ask her what she means, and she doesn't reply. Then suddenly, I feel like someone's standing next to me, but it doesn't feel negative or bad, just as though someone's right there with me. Since it didn't have a negative vibe to it, I just finished my cigarette and left. Later on down the road, I realised that I forgot to fuel up at my last stop when the warning light came on, so I scrambled to look at my GPS and find the nearest stop. I find one and set the course. As I roll into the truck stop, my truck starts stuttering, and I barely make it to the fuel line before the truck dies. It wasn't until fueling up that I realised what had happened to me at the last truck stop, and it was terrifying. I've seen drivers duke it out on some fuel lines many times. I've seen brawls happen in the back of truck stops, many rookies hitting each other's trucks by accident, you name it. The most memorable moment, however, was a fight when I was on a trip with a co-driver whose name I won't say. In Arizona, I stop at a truck stop between Flag State and the CA state line. After an eternity, I finally get fueled up on the fuel line. I fuel up and go inside, getting a drink and food. I come back and the sleeper curtain is open. No co-driver. Lonely half hour goes by and he comes out. That's cool. He can take his time because I'm not going to stop from here out. I put some trash in a couple of bags, putting it on the floor. It was mostly his trash from his shift prior. I can't stand having any in the cab. He opens the door and dumps bags on the ground, so I lit him up with all the fury I can muster. There's 2 garbage cans 10 feet away. I go put the bags in the trash cans and come back to the truck. As I'm doing my logbook, I look up and glance in the mirror. I can see 2 drivers flapping wings at each other. Oh, a fight. Let's watch. Suddenly, they go like baboons. Fists flying, but they're not landing. Then one of the drivers picks up the trash can and throws it at the other driver. The can hits him square in the face and blows open with paper towels going everywhere. Just like WWE apparently. So I get out and start walking back to watch. And apparently, every other driver on the fuel line had the same idea. The driver who got trash canned reaches into the storage compartment near him, pulling out a huge chain with a padlock on it, swinging furiously, and he's coming back and forth to the truck where the trash canner is. The other guy takes out the pump, going to his driver's side window, knocks a mirror off his truck, puts a huge dent in his fender. He then makes it back to the trash canner. The guy runs around the other side of the fuel pump. He then starts beating him with a bottle. All this does is gets him wet and pisses him off even more now. Enough time rolls by, but they realise neither weapon of choice is doing any good. And in one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, they both stop, bear hug each other, then walk off. I walk inside to tell the lady there's a fire in the fuel line and she breaks out some kind of stick to break it up. But they're all good now. It's honestly the weirdest thing that I've ever seen.